Welcome to episode 2 of Coaching Conversations. I'm delighted to announce a new topic today that we want to explore as a trio, and that's on the topic of early specialization. So just a little bit about me. I'm Simon Wheatley, and I'm one of the panelists on Coaching Conversations podcasts and webinars. And we've chosen this topic of early specialization because I worked a lot for the Lawn Tennis Association in the areas of 14 and under player development and talent identification. So we ran a talent identification program at the Lawn Tennis Association for almost 8 years. And that was really looking at identifying children in county, regional, and national level through mini tennis into yellow ball, doing assessments, doing tests, collecting data on children for a very long period of time to track their development through the younger years. So that really led me into being very, very interested in this whole idea of young player development and how we as coaches and as federations define what we see as talent, and how young we should start to look at identifying players, and when people come through the ages and stages at different times. That really fascinated me. So we're going to really get into that today. So I'm going to hand over to Voye just to talk about his experiences a little bit in this topic.
Okay, thanks, Simon. I'm also excited we are doing this for the second time. And the topic today also is very close to my heart because as a coach, I was working predominantly with the performance or high performance players, juniors. And I would say that this topic is directly related to this as a national coach in Croatia, or later on as a development officer for ITF and Tennis Europe development programs. I was very often in contact and I actually asked about giving some advices in players' development and also related to this topic. So, Frank, your turn.
So my name is Frank van Vrijenhoven from the Netherlands. In the late 80s, I've been a national coach and responsible for junior development, the selected players for the national teams. After that, in the late 90s, together with a lot of national coaches and high performance coaches, I've been working on a player development program, and we worked on specific phases in the development, like what to do with young players and when to specialize, etc. So the topic of early specialization has crossed my path through the years very often, because it's something that you will find everywhere, especially when you talk with parents and when you talk to inexperienced coaches who have their personal view on how to do that. So I'm looking forward to discuss this with my two friends abroad, and let's see where it goes.
Thanks, guys. So I've just put on the screen a few questions that we've put together that we want to unpack today as a trio. And I'm right away going to hand the first question over to Voye, and then I'll pass to you if I can, Frank. And that's just to be really clear on what do we mean by early specialization in tennis. So Voye, do you want to unpack that one first?
It's a very interesting question because I was also in preparation for this conversation looking in the internet and try to find out like a unique definition of early specialization in sport in general, and there is no one like agreed definition, but there are several phrases that are very important and related to this, like early specialization means excluding participation in other range of sports with the purpose of fun and enjoyment, just looking and focusing on one sport at early age. Then having a high volume of deliberate practice. So deliberate practice is another important phrase that we can associate with early specialization, and of course taking part in, I would call it, the result-oriented competitions. So this would be, from my side, like a quick introduction in what is actually early specialization. Frank?
Yeah, I like this definition or description of what it means. Next to that, I think it's important to realize that a lot of people, coaches and parents within tennis even like to specialize very early into a specific game type. So within being, let's say, one-sided in only playing tennis, it could be that they will lead their player or their kid to be the new Nadal or the new Djokovic and just work that way, without taking into consideration that this is a young kid that doesn't have the fully grown body yet, and you cannot have the same load, not expect the same shots, etc. So for me, there are two kinds of specialization. One, just tennis only, like you described and defined very well. Then the second one is within tennis, very one-sided, to just spend only time on things that will make you obviously very successful, and not taking into consideration that kids may have different talents and should go a different path.
So okay, so you're right. So let's say there's two families here. The first one is the one I think we should unpack first of all, and it's this whole idea that should children specialize in tennis at an early age? And then we need to define, well, what do we mean by early age? Because the research is pretty clear. If we use the tour, the top 100, top 200 players, if we use that as the benchmark and then track back when those players were introduced and exposed to tennis, I guess let's be really clear with our audience. The research is very clear. It's the data is in. The research has been done. Decade upon decade. They all started playing tennis under the age of 7, most of them age 4, 5, 6. So they were introduced to tennis at a very young age. So if we use the tour, player development, the end goal as the end goal, and I don't think that is the end goal for most people, that your introduction to tennis is at a very early age. So I just wanted you to just expand on that, the two of you, on what are the implications for that? What are the challenges on that? Will that change over time? Is the system rigged? Because there's two things to consider here. Is the system set up that the children will only succeed if they're exposed to tennis at early age? Or is that what is demanded of the game in order to be good at the highest level later on? Because we know that the average age of top 100 is 26, 27 years of age in the men's, a little bit younger in the women's. It's gradually getting older and older, decade upon decade. There will be a tipping point on that. I really believe that at some stage it will plateau, but it seems to be a trend of growing. Average age of top 100. Men and females similar, women a little bit younger. But the average age of breaking into the top 100 is still very young. It's 19, 20. It's still pretty young. So these players that are very good, you know, the Grand Slam players, they do tend to succeed at transitioning from juniors into seniors relatively quickly, although there are examples of people that are more journey women that take a bit longer. But there seems to be this kind of, if you start playing tennis at age 6, by 16 to 18, you are making the jump from junior to senior. This 10 years probably is more like 14 years. However, is that a concern? Do you need to start playing tennis at a young age in order to reach the highest levels of the game at an older age, when we know that the ranking distribution is getting older? However, there's a slight allusion to that. People are transitioning into the top 100 at still a relatively young age. They're just staying there for longer. So do you want to just unpack that? There's a lot there to unpack. I'm sorry, but I think there's some interesting points to discuss.
I'd like to jump on is what you just said, Simon, because I will try to be very straightforward and would try to say that, yes, I believe that nowadays you have to be focusing on tennis at very early age. And I will just put two key reasons from my experience. One is because tennis is a sport with a lot of technical skills involved. And actually for developing technical skills, it's actually a very good age to start early at the age of 8, 9 and finishing with developing this fundamental technical skills for all the strokes up to the age of 12, 13. And then with maturity and so on, puberty, they will add some power to the strokes and so on, and refine them obviously according to their game style. But there is another reason, and that is, in my opinion, also from my experience in Eastern European countries where I was working as a development officer, that if you are not successful at the young age in terms of competitions, you will not get support. The best coaches will not work with you. So what is your chance? And nowadays, I would like to add that at the end of this, what I'm just saying is that international competition structure that is starting with 12 and under international competitions are fostering actually young competitive maturation of the players. So if you are not there your motivation is suffering, your perhaps belief, and especially when you are coming from a smaller country. If you are from France, that's not so important. But if you are from Moldova, where 15 years ago was a main draw in Orange Court, 16 players in whole country, imagine. So this is from my side for now.
Right. I would like to approach it slightly different. When you think of the brain development and all the links that are being made as a young kid, there's a lot of coordination going on there, and every new skill that you are facing will build new connections in the brain. So I strongly believe in the fact that you need a lot of different activities to fully exploit this brain development, which means all the connections that help you to coordinate movements. The importance of playing tennis at a young age is that it should be something that you get familiar with, and that means the competition, seeing players in the combat of a match, etc., is essential to kind of install this culture. And what you see a lot, what I remember from the Swedish players, many of the former successful Swedish players were also very good in ice hockey. And I'm sure that what you need in ice hockey, like the balance and very good legs for the acceleration and the eye-hand coordination, etc., there's a lot of links there that you can transfer to tennis. And at a certain stage, you will see that they chose tennis and then specialized. In the Netherlands, of course, football is our first and biggest sports. A lot of our players, also our former professional players, have been pretty good football players or soccer players. So that means that the relatedness between all the coordinative skills that you learn in those other sports, you take them or can take them to tennis. Even subconsciously, they really are important for this general buildup. The other element is playing matches and having success, because, as you said, Hervoje, it's important that you feel what it is and how to compete to other and compare to other players. And from that success, when, let's say, tournaments and coaches acknowledge that you are, let's say, an interesting player, that really helps to accelerate the development of that player.
So this is quite interesting, because I've really listened carefully to what the two of you had to say, and what I pick up is maybe two opposing views, which is, look, you got to be in this young. If you want to take tennis seriously and player development is the goal, i.e. playing college tennis or playing professional tennis, then you've got to be in this game young. And there's a few reasons for that. And the coordination needed, the technical skills that are required, there are windows of opportunity to really maximize in order to help you develop those skills at pace. So there's that. And you mentioned a good point then, Hervoje. The system is slightly rigged, because if you are good young, you're given more opportunities. And then because you're given more opportunities, you're exposed to more and more better players across your domestic and international geography. So there is a bit of a rigged game to that. Frank, you're saying, well, actually, we have to be careful here, because a lot of the research also suggests that many top players were playing a lot of other sports, and Judy would be a subscriber to that. Judy Murray would I've heard her speak many times about Andy's exposure to cricket and football. He was a very good footballer, and I think it was only about the age of 11 or 12 that he decided to choose. There's the old poem, I can't remember, it was by Robert Frost, is it? I went into the woods and there were two roads and I chose the path least trodden. And most people would have chosen football, but Andy chose tennis. And thank God he did for British tennis. But my point is that at some stage, is the question more, okay, is the narrative more, as a parent, you have a responsibility to expose your child under the age of 8, 9 to many sports for sociological reasons, to socialize your child in games, to develop their all-round physical literacy. But at some stage, as your child starts to drop the sports off he doesn't like, she doesn't like, don't like rugby, don't like netball, don't like dance, don't like gymnastics. You know, you will filter through the hedges, the bushes, and you'll get to maybe 1, 2, or 3 choices. So then it's like you're 10 or 11 and it's football, tennis, piano. Maybe those are your 3 leisure pursuits. And then at some stage, one of those has to go a bit more. And then one of those has to go. So you choose the one that you feel you're best at, most enjoy, that seems the most obvious path to choose. I mean, is that a narrative that you would subscribe to, or is that something you would push back on? Or because I'm trying to balance the opposing views, which is, look, most good players, I heard a great saying once, not all good juniors become good pros, but all good pros were good juniors. Even if their ranking wasn't high, they were still good juniors. They just chose a different path, maybe less junior events, more 15Ks, 20Ks, challenges. So, and I like that because it does. Andy Murray was at Tarbes at 13 in the final. He was a good junior.
I would like to add one more saying, which is early ripe, early rotten. And especially when kids are absolutely the best, the number 1, under 12, under 14, very often you see them, well, be rotten at a early age. And what you want to have is enough success to enjoy the game and feel challenged and still want to continue, instead of having so much success that actually you're the best, you get the contracts, a lot of attention, people talk about you as being the next Andy Murray or Rafa Nadal or whatever. So you don't want to have that pressure too much and expectations, but you do want them to really feel competitive in tennis and feel that they can get along. So I recognize your statement, Simon, where you said that all good players have been good juniors. And then you can discuss about whether that was like top 3 or top 5 or top 10. I have the feeling top 10 or top 15 is in the bigger countries enough to have the confidence that you could really, make a successful attempt to become a pro player.
Can I just, before you come in, just to zone in on one thing you said, which has always bothered me from a coach education point of view, and that I've tried to really break down and unpack, and that is this idea of, well, if you were early ripe, early rotten, and I get your sentiments that if you're the best under 12, then, well, there's 2 places to go. You have to stay the best, but you stay the best within your domestic country, then within Europe, within the world. Or you degenerate and you go down. There's only one place you can go from number 1. But I think it's more complex than that, Frank. When I looked at the rankings of under 12s, under 14s, year on year, if you look at it at one point in time in the year, there is one player that's number 1. But that's not how it works. Because if you look over 52 weeks, there may be 10 players that were number 1 at one stage, because the rankings change every 2 weeks. You win a tournament, you lose first round. You're ranking, you're 3 in the country, you're 1 in the country. So many players were top 1 under 12. Many, and a lot of those players were top 6 under 12, because there's transient movement between the ages and between the ranking within each age. So I think that's a really important point to kind of explore. You may have been the best for 2 of those weeks in the year, but the other 50 weeks, you were number 6 in the country, and therefore you weren't the best. And that's the reality of under 12 rankings. So focusing on if you were the best under 12, it's like, well, were you the best? What, you were number 1 for 3 years in a row and no one ever moved you off that spot? I think that rarely happens. And therefore, it's not always about the number 1. It is about scanning a bit wider to the top 10, top 20. That's the interesting group.
Yeah, one short reaction to that is I'm specifically talking about the national champion. Because the fact that, let's say, every week there would be another number 1, that's not threatening or that's not spoiling the thing. But especially when with the national championships, what I see in the Netherlands and probably everywhere, all coaches, all parents, everyone is there, people from the board in the federation, everyone is there. When you become the champion, you get the trophy, there are photos everywhere, etc. And all these other tournaments where you can just by accident or because you're really good become number 1 and 3 weeks later is another one, that's a different story. The fact that you're number 1 on the ranking, may get you to face all these expectations. But those national champions who then can go to a European Championship or whatever kind of event and maybe get an offer from a sponsor and all the things, the interviews, that is the thing that's most threatening in my point of view.
I'm listening to you carefully, and I think it's a very broad also discussion, because one thing is coming to my mind that we didn't touch. When we talk about early specialization and really focusing on tennis, then for me, it's a synonym with a lot of individual practice. Especially, I was traveling a lot in Eastern Europe and also in my own country, in Croatia. Actually, all the players that became really good in Croatia are like individual projects. And they were from very young age, like Borna Čorić and all the others now, Konjuh, have been working individually from the age of, I would dare to say, 9-10 years old. And here I see also a big threat, because not many kids can actually sustain and actually practice so much as they did and keep the motivation without burning out mentally. Compared to many, I would call it regular kids, including my son that is at the moment 10. And when I asked him that he plays with me individually, then he said, who will come with us? And I would call him a regular guy. But I know from also experience with some other players that they were able to practice at the age of 10, perhaps 1 or 2 hours per day individually. And then here also very often the people that don't understand the individual development pathways of the young players are copying what the, let's say, former champion or the champion did. And we all know like stories about Hewitt and some others that actually practice 2-3 hours per day at the age of 11-12. Azarenka did it also, I know it personally. But yeah, who can copy it? That's another question. So here we have to always be aware about individual, I would call it capacity for work. And of course, I want to emphasize one more time, amount of individual work with the players that for me is a big threat when we talk about early specialization in tennis.
So, wow, there's so many things there to pull out. And I want to try and come back to a central point, which is, you know, you're a parent, you're a coach, and your child has been introduced to tennis at a young age. It seems to be that globally is a trend that is followed by most countries, that most children get to go and play tennis at 5, 6, 7, 8 years of age. And mini tennis has done a lot to help that, right? Mini tennis has allowed coaches to actually deliver a program for kids to young children. And not every country does red, orange, and green, but most do in some format. And therefore, children can be introduced to tennis. Now, let's follow the story. They're pretty good, or they enjoy it. Then they come to 2 squads, 3 squads, 4 squads. The more they come to tennis, then the less time they have for other sports. Now, is that early specialization? Would you define that as the selecting of tennis over and beyond other sports is in its essence early specialization to the sport? Is that, have I got that right in your opinion?
Frank, you or me first?
You go ahead.
Actually, there are not so much research done about really positives and negatives. Actually, we always talk about early specialization like something negative, like, or
great point. Great point.
But is there something also positive? Because when you start to, let's say, start to travel at the younger ages, you start to be much more aware and responsible to what you are doing. Is it something also positive for personal development? That's a question.
You know what, that is genius, Savoye. And I even came into the topic ready to fight it. You know, early specialization. It's got that horrible negative connotation, isn't it? That it feels like, oh, we're making children choose tennis too young. That's where people's mind goes to when you use the phrase early specialization. But actually, finding something you're passionate about young could be a fantastic thing, because you are exposed to that world sociologically, technologically, digitally, your peerage. tennis clubs can become the second home for children. We know that. And is that a negative thing? Well, in many ways, no. It's incredibly healthy because it allows children to follow what they choose that they like to do. Why do you need to try 500 sports 500 times in order to then pick the one you like when you're mature as a teenager? It's like, no, maybe Jack Draper. Jack Draper is a 19, 20-year-old tennis player. He's one of our top up-and-coming junior male players. Sorry, he played at Queen's last week and he made third round. And I remember him at a very young age. He used to come to our talent ID days, age 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The guy just wanted to play tennis all the time. He was such a tennis fanatic, young. Tennis spoke to him at a young age. And he didn't want to play 500 different sports. Tennis is what he wanted to choose. He mucked around at school playing other sports. It wasn't like he never played other sports. Of course he did. But he chose tennis young, and he's now playing at Queen's. He's one of the highest ranked male players for his age.
And then leave to you the stage. But I have to come back to what you just said, because yes, some kids just like to play tennis more than the others. And also, please don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to propose that everybody has to start playing only tennis at the age of 6. I mentioned my son is playing tennis now. He started with gymnastics, and then he went to judo. And then he asked me that he also wants to play, beside tennis, also soccer. So he's at present this week also at a soccer camp. So I'm not against a broad, I would call it, education in sport at all. Not at all. And I believe I'm strongly convinced that it's much better than to start practicing 2 hours per day individually tennis at the age of 8. So just to be clear about that. But also with this individual practice, I think nowadays in terms of also catching up with international competition, and actually early specialization is related to the players that are aiming for some kind of, I would call it, competitive career. And if you want to be ready to compete, especially with the standards coming from, let's say, in girls tennis from Eastern Europe, then if you just do 2-3 hours tennis per week, you're just not having enough hits on the ball. So that's a challenge. What I believe we can also try to touch now, because about this international, I would call it, competition structure and age eligibility rules that actually I believe very much are driving this early specialization in tennis. And it's not like the wish of us as a coaches, or even I would say parents, but it's pretty much also driven from outside. Frank, perhaps you can add something on this.
Well, it's getting more and more complicated when we dig a bit deeper. When you take another element in, is that in, let's say, the less rich countries, it's not that children or parents can choose for all the sports that you can think of. So a lot of people will just have one opportunity just to play football and never did anything else and became very good or not. Could also be just tennis. And one of the good things about having one opportunity only is that that I better make the best of it and see where I can get, because I don't have anything else. Because some kids really do many different sports and will actually choose the one not where they have most talent, but where they like it most, or it's socially very nice, and they have success maybe because of the other players in the team. So the choices kids have is very much related to the, let's say, the economy of the country. So back to what I mentioned earlier, is the specialization could be just one sport, whether it's forced or out of free will. And the free will could be the parent deciding that you only play tennis, but that is something. The other thing is within the tennis, whether you are specializing early or you give a broad, let's say, development in all different things, because in physical training, you can appeal to a lot of coordination skills that will help you to also become a better player. So the element of all-round development of the body as a young kid, that is the one thing that I would like to stress. And it is possible to do that within one sport only, where you started early, but you have so many skills that you are facing and getting acquainted with that it helps your brain development to really find solutions for all kinds of situations.
I think that's a really intelligent point, Frank, because I do a lot of visits to academies, and these children are young. They're 10, 11, 12. They're playing a lot of tennis, 20 hours a week. And that, when you look at that scheduled into their timetable, married with their school education, they're scheduled to death, these children. But within those 20 hours, it's not all cross-court forehands. It's not all cross-court forehands. They're developed in every warm-up. They play football and basketball, and they take the kids swimming with the physical conditioning. By being immersed into a tennis program, a demanding one, a heavy one, young, doesn't mean you won't receive the level of physical literacy that other sports would provide you. You just have to make sure the tennis environment withdraws upon the other different sporting skills that you would naturally receive and develop if you were exposed to those sports. So I think that's a really good point, parents and coaches to consider. Don't be scared to give children more tennis young, but just be careful giving them just tennis when they come to tennis. And that's a really nice way of, as a nuanced understanding of the physical development of children, if you choose just tennis, that you don't have to compromise on that. You can have both within the tennis world. So it's a really smart. Voye, you said something that we didn't expand upon, and I'm really intrigued.
One thing here, because we are talking and one idea is coming after the other. And Frank, sorry to say, but you forgot what it means to be a father of a young kid. And Simon, you have just been starting. So
Yeah.
one important element in terms of, I would call it a possibility to practice different sports at the same time. And that's actually the way of life nowadays. My wife is working until 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon every day. And I'm very happy when I'm not on the road. Thanks to Corona last year, I was mostly at home, but usually I'm also traveling. Imagine that actually for tennis, I have to drive my kid for 20 minutes, stay there for 1.5 hours, and 20 minutes back is 2.5 hours. And then if you would like to bring him to 3 sports, and if you have to drive the kid around, forget it from logistical point of view. So he's also playing football because it's in close to next to his school. So it's 500 meters away, so he can also go low. So I would say that also this versatility, I would say, would be related to the school sport programs that I don't know how much quality have in UK or the Netherlands, but in Croatia, unfortunately, not really quality programs, because there the kids could actually have this, I would say, broad introduction to different sports in the school sports. But in Croatia, the system is not too good, and they don't really learn a lot. So that would help, so that you are adding something. And yeah, I'm not fond of actually having 10 times 1 hour different activities for the kids that are killed with too many activities, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Sure. And actually, Voye, the thing on that as well is, of course, it's even worse than that, because if that's one child, you do 5 sports, one child, then another child's doing different sports, different days. That must be an absolute disaster for parents who have to schedule that in around their own work. So the family life is actually pushed and pulled in every direction. The beauty about choosing tennis at a young age is that they are at the same club every night. You drop them off, it's safe, and you feel like it's a bit more easy to manage. So I can see huge benefits there from the family logistics point of view. Sorry, Frank, I didn't mean to interrupt. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that Voye actually puts in another element of this complex topic, because I mentioned the economy, but here you also talk about the geography, because my now adult daughters, in my town, they could go on the bicycle to the tennis club. And actually, we have other sports. It's quite a small village. As you know, all Dutch people have bicycles, so they can go there. And of course, when one of the parents has time, you join and you see them play. With the Wi-Fi in most clubs, you can just work while you're there. So, actually, it's very different per country, whether it is a limiting factor or whether it's actually a good factor, like giving more possibilities because of the distance and the traffic and well, again, economy plays a part there. So that is it again shows that there are so many angles to this topic, and it's not about it should be like this or this is the best or this is the only way, but it's all combined. It's a decisive factor for the development of players.
So let's go there. Let's get a bit dark here. What is the danger of early specialization? You've seen it, Frank. You gave the very tangible example that, well, you know what, Simon, the 12 and under national champion, the pressure that puts on that child, that could lead to a negative tennis experience later on because they were champion young, early ripe, early rotten, to use your phrase. And that is potentially a danger, right? If you're too good, too young, that there's only one place you can go. But that's, of course, not true, because if you're good young, you can also keep going, getting better in the next age group, wider across a geographical span. So Andy Murray won 12 and under national championships. It's not like he then gave up at 13. He kept getting better and better and better. So there's not one, it's a multivariate path here. You know, there's different ways to go. So let's just talk about that a little bit. What are the dangers, do you think, with children that just specialize in tennis at an early age?
Right. I refer back to what I started with when I talked about two kinds of specialization. One is to specialize just in tennis, and everything around it is still aimed to be a better tennis player. Right. That's one. But then the other specialization is that a lot of people who think their child is a successful under 12, like the number one in the country, and then they stick to that, the game they play as a junior. And I dare to say that junior tennis is not the same as adult tennis. So if the attitude is like, you know, this is nice, he manages to fight through difficult matches, that's why he is a number one, he won a champion, maybe again under 14, then he loses under 16, like being top 10 only or something. But as long as they keep developing in all fields, and then you have the possibility to become a great player. But when you specialize to defensive play, what you see a lot with champions under 12, they just hit the loopy shots and only play defensive, and that's why they win. So that is not the game to become a good player.
So I think what you're saying, if I'm right, and correct me if I'm wrong, is early specialization can lead to early success. Early success can lead to complacency, and you don't breed a culture and mentality of continuous development. That's what you're saying, essentially, right? It's like that people get good young and they just stay doing what they did to be successful, and they don't continuously develop and evolve their game.
Yeah, that's for sure one of the important things, that you have to continue to develop your skills up to a higher level. Right. The shots that make you a champion under 16 are just a joke when you play in the future tournaments, because there they can all hit nice forehands, backhands, and serves and returns, you know, but it has to go up to the next level. So moving borders and challenging the skills that you have is the important thing. And then the good thing about being successful at a young age is that you've learned to fight through difficult situations. So the mental development probably helps you to become a good player, but only if you also develop the other parts of the game.
Frank, great. Hrvoje?
Yeah, actually, I don't know any player that became really good and that he didn't play a lot.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Now what means a lot? And here I would like to refer to early specialization and possible threat, what you just also asked us to refer to, is, and I'm coming back to these individual practices. Because in individual practice, first of all, the kids get a high volume of shots. And that can be very threatening. And we know that actually this early specialization, when it's combined with high volume, is leading to bigger risk of injury. So that's for sure a big threat of early specialization. And also, I would refer to this one more time, to this individual practice. Why? Because it's like I would call it a doping practice for the young kids. Because you know that when you're working with 4 kids alone on the court as a coach, you don't have enough time to focus on something, and you need sometimes 20 minutes to just make him understand or practice a little bit, and you don't have it in 1 hour because you have 4 kids. So in my opinion, having this like a individual possibility to individual work at young age is very important, but in very limited amount. And when it is misused, and this is what I'm referring to as a specifically, let's say, wrong misuse of early specialization in tennis, and having a lot of individual hours with the coach that can bring the kids to the top, because we know that they will have just much more practice at a young age and become at the top in their countries, and then so much expectation, pressure will be put on them, and then they break down and burned out. So if somebody is very good because he plays a lot, he goes to the club and stays there for hours. And I know when I talk with my good friend Goran Prpic, he said, I was just there for hours and hours waiting for somebody to want to play with me. And when there was nobody else there, he was hitting the ball into the fence and take the ball and hit it again and play on the wall. So actually, it was not somebody pushed him. As you said, there are such kids, and because of that, I would say it's the way, like Frank said, the developing players' game or fixing players' game too early, too much, I would say, individual practice, too much emphasis on the results in the competitions. That can be very, very negative elements of early specialization.
Well, one of the things you said there is and there's loads of things there to talk about, but let me just choose one. Burnout. That's what a lot of people would associate with early specialization, that, you know what, they played too much tennis too young, and then they got to the teenage years and they'd had enough of tennis. Yeah. Of course, what people don't realize, there's always a fly in the ointment, that they could have played less tennis young and they still could have given it up. You got no idea that by playing too much too young, that was the fundamental reason why they chose to leave the sport. It might be another reason why they chose to leave the sport. Parent pressure, peer pressure, that they got good at something else, academically perhaps, that they found another sport. There's a whole host of reasons why people give up tennis. And it's not always because they played too much too young. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And you have to see that really clearly as a coach and a parent, because it's such an important way to see the world. You talked there about, that the player, Gregor, you're the person that you mentioned, Avoye, don't recognize the name. Primic. Yeah. Now, of course, Andy Murray was like that. Judy said that he was down the club, under 10. He was playing with the men's C team in the league. That he just loved to play with anyone. Just loved playing tennis. And you know what? You put Andy Murray in the middle of a field and ask him to cut down trees, he'll be there all bloody day doing it, because it's just built that way. That's what makes champions great, isn't it? That there's something obsessively unique about them that makes them strive to want to be a champion. And that's not inbuilt in everyone. And look, maybe that's genetics and biology, or maybe it's socially cultural. I don't know. But what I do know is that not everyone has that same type. Otherwise, they'd all be number one in the world, and they're not. And therefore, we have to take into consideration that there are some kids that just want to live at the tennis club. And we shouldn't, yes, we should watch that and monitor it, because maybe too much too young does lead to burnout, or maybe it leads to striving to build a champion mindset and a love for the game that transcends throughout their family and friends and community and the sport and the world. So we shouldn't underestimate that.
So I would like to add to that. There's, of course, the research, I think by Anderson, who said that 10,000 hours is what all the great people, whether it's in playing piano or it's a football player or tennis, all those people put 10,000 hours in. So a lot of coaches and parents heard about that, and they start calculating. So what they do is, well, if it's 10,000 hours that you need to be successful, then let's make sure that at the age of 14 or 16, we made that 10,000 hours. So they start to calculate, and then you get like a mathematical approach to the program that they should go through. And the example you just gave is talking about passion and about the kid really being on court all day and wanting to play with everyone just to have the practice and etc. which is different than when it's like it's forced or you're obliged to make that many hours because otherwise you're losing track. Now,
Yes.
of course, we also know the examples of parents who have been very pushy and forcing players to practice. And there's quite a few examples of people who became great players regardless of that. So it is, again, not, because there's also a cultural background. In Eastern European countries, it was more that approach. In Western Europe, it's unacceptable when the parents are so aggressive almost to make the kid play. And again, when you see the successes in Eastern Europe, you can't deny that it has been very successful. But when East European coaches came to West European countries, they were in trouble because a lot of parents would not accept them to work like that. So again, there's so many different factors. There are a lot of factors deciding on whether it's successful or not. And you cannot just take it to the 10,000 hours. It is also the deliberate practice you mentioned before. And it's not just those hours, because I know people who made 20,000 hours and still are bad players because they practice only the things they already master and they never move borders. So it's not effective then. So it becomes more and more complicated in this way.
It is a complex topic, and that's why it's fun to talk about. And I'm loving this because you made something good there. If children are socially engineered into a training program that makes them train lots of numbers of hours, week on week, travel, and they don't have a natural inclination to want to do that. That's not something that they enjoy doing, and they're doing it to be compliant to their parents' wishes. They're doing it to respect their parents' direction. Or their older brother did it, so they feel they should do it. And I'm sure that happens a lot. And that's the dark magic of our sport, isn't it? It's like there are a lot of children that got good and became top tennis players, not because of their passionate interest as a young child, but probably because they were told to do it, made to do it. And therefore they didn't see any other route in their life. They'd played so much tennis by 12 that they can't stop, because all the work they've done before would be a waste of time. So they have to just keep going. Some make it, some don't. And I think that's a really dark view of the way a lot of players would achieve their potential in the sport. But it happens, and we must acknowledge that. A lot of good players in the world were very much pushed by their parents. Okay. And I think that's something we just have to admit, that it happens. And the parent coach is emerging more and more now in the world. Avoya?
Yeah, we are talking about very different things, obviously. And now when Frank mentioned 10,000 hours rule that we all are familiar with, then I was asking myself, actually, what is possible answer to this early specialization that obviously brings a lot of top players? Because we all agree that we don't want to propose to the people that everybody should go at the age of 4 or 5 to tennis, playing 10 hours tennis at the age of 8. So what is actually the option? And for me, the option is quality. Quality practice is actually, for me, the way out of this. I would call it the chicken or egg question. What is better or not? And then I'm always thinking about what is going on typically in the clubs. And especially in Western Europe, also you have a lot of clubs where they have big groups of kids, 6, 8 kids with unexperienced coach. And here I see a problem, because obviously you can be very experienced coach, but with 6 or 8 kids, age of 4, 5, 6, you will not make a big progress. You don't have time. And also now you think about somebody who is just assistant, and he's actually supervising the activity, but not really developing the kids. So I think we are coming to our first topic, is related to the structure of the sport and education of the coaches and parents when we talk about early specialization, so that we also bring the message around. It's about quality and not the quantity when we talk about the kids, with, of course, everything what we just said before.
Well, and that's absolutely essential, and I absolutely celebrate that. I guess what I would say, though, is that Frank mentioned 10,000 hours. I think it's more than 10,000 hours, actually. I think 10,000 hours as a minimum.
Yeah.
I think roughly most tennis players, by the time they get to 18, 19, transitioning into the professional tour, I think they've played far more than that in our sports. Maybe in other disciplines you can get there quicker, but in my opinion, we did some little research at the UK tennis players, and the numbers were much higher. But how do you apportion those hours per age and stage? That's probably the more important question. It's like, and that's the question we all get asked: how many hours should my kid play? And I hate that question. I hate it.
No.
But I got that all the time. I worked in 14 under tennis, Frank, and that was the number one question parents used to ask me. Not how can my kid get good? How should they love tennis forever? They didn't care about that.
No.
How many hours should I invest in my child's tennis week on week? And that's what I got.
Let me link this. First, I'd like to confirm what Hervoje just mentioned when he said, well, in our talk so far, we mentioned deliberate practice. Hervoje mentioned quality practice. I would add to that goal-oriented practice, because in case the coach has no idea what he's working at, but he's got some nice drills and just let players hit some forehands and backhands, and as long as they're quiet, it's all okay. Or really having a clear view of where they're going, what they have to learn, and how you can move borders for them and get them to a next level. That's a totally different thing. And the thing that I would like to discuss with Hervoje is the element of individual coaching. Our most successful coach in the Netherlands, who worked with 3 or 4 top 100 players, and one has been number 11 in the world, this coach never worked one-on-one, as far as I know. He always worked on 3 or 4 courts at the same time, but very much on elements that they needed to do. And he was famous for his group coaching, and he was good as a group coach. He was very dominant there, and no one would actually dare to not do what he was instructing to you. While the number 2 most successful coach, who worked with Richard Krajicek, for example, so a different guy, he worked almost only individual with players. And so you see that the skill to teach something of quality, something of importance for the development of the player, is not that much on whether it's a group session or an individual session. I believe very strongly that the coach has to know what he's doing. Some coaches are able to do that with a larger group, and some coaches will prefer to do that one-on-one. And it's more like a personal quality of a coach to be able to do that. But as long as it is on purpose that you're doing things, that's deliberate practice, you know where you're going, that is where let's say the 10,000 hours become less important. So I don't like to refer to the numbers. I like to refer to the quality, and find the coach who is good for your kid to work with, which is not always easy, of course.
Okay, just to refer to you related to this individual practice, Frank, a question before I say something is, the coach you mentioned, he was working with players from which age? The one that was working with in a group setup?
Most of the kids were like, let's say 12 plus.
12 plus, yeah.
And would always work with them all the way up to their highest level.
I fully agree with you, first of all, that it's depending on the coaching skills. And many coaches are not so good in group practice as they should be. Number one, for sure. Second, when I was referring to overusing individual practice, I was actually thinking about applying this with the players of the younger age, from 8 to 11, where that actually really can accelerate development, especially of technical skills, because of high volume in relatively short time. Because when you have kids 8 years old, 4 of them practicing with each other, very often there are a lot of mistakes, as you know. And this is what I am referring at in terms of, I would call it misusing individual practice. I'm not advocating it at all. It's about misusing it in order to accelerate young players' development. But anyway, fully agree, and we are all, I believe, all in agreement that it's about the quality. What means quality and not the quantity? So for you, Simon, just one advice: when you are next time asked about how much practice or does a player needs more practice, is very simple. I was always facing the same question by the parents, and I was asking, okay, so how much your Simon practicing now? And they would say Simon is practicing 8 hours per week. Doesn't matter now the age, yeah. And then I was asking, and how much apart from these 8 hours, Simon is playing on the wall in his bedroom or somewhere else? And if they would say he doesn't play anything else, then I would say he doesn't need more practice. Because if you need a practice, you will find a way as a kid to play with the racket and the ball.
Well, and I think, you talked about the importance of quality training. I will just arm wrestle that a little bit and say, agree. However, I think there is an epidemic of children not playing with free play anymore, practice sets, going down the club, playing mixed doubles with mum, dad, and brother. And so they're scheduled to death, they're timetabled to hell. And the tournament schedule is in, and they're traveling up and down the country, but they don't actually get to enjoy the game the way we enjoy it. That free play with no decision making and thinking and complex outcome results, and no drills cross court where they're counting the shots in. It's all so serious. And the more they can play, not just stupid games. I don't just mean they need to play around the world every day to like tennis, but you know what, there is some truth in that the children should want to play tennis without someone being there telling them what to do. And if they don't do that, then there's something worrying for me. There's something really concerning about that they need to come to you and say, oh, do you want to come and play a set, Dad? Do you want to just feed me some balls and have a hit around the club, have a smack around? And if we have that type of mentality within young children, I think that's going to breed a more healthy long-term outlook for these children, and less people dropping off from the sport. That's something, but yeah. the hours a week is an important question.
Of course,
because your mum and dad, and you want to know, well, they're doing that, and that kid's doing that, and in Spain they do that. So there is this natural instinct as a parent to compare across gender and age and project over time what you think that the child will need to do in order to reach their potential. And I think there is a minimum and maximum. And people don't want to say it, because if you say it, then you hold yourself accountable to it. Karl May's always used to say, you play your hours in age a week, plus or minus 20%. And that was like a general rule of thumb. Now, of course, that's not true. And the reason why it's not true, and he would say this as well, is that it depends on so many things. So, for example, if you're an 8-year-old and you took up tennis last week, you're not going to play 8 hours a week. You only learned last week to hit a ball. So you might play 1 hour a week, and then next year 2 hours a week. So you have to grade their exposure to tennis based on their starting age, their physiological age, what's available to them, financially what's affordable, what their passion is. Do they have dual aspirations and do this and that and this and that? Why, it's such a complex, you can't find a unilateral solution for a multivariate problem. And that's a multivariate problem, that it's like, how many hours should I play? Because if you play tournaments as well, then your 8 hours a week goes to 12 hours a week, but the next week it's back to 8 hours. So the reality is that it's so complex. And that question, I hate getting it, because I just feel that it needs a very complex response. And you don't really help the parent in the end by giving them that response, because they're still led to, well, my coach is telling me they need 4 squads, 2 individuals, and an S&C trainer, and they're kind of bullied into it by the way the system is rigged. And that leads a little bit to the last question, which we'll come on to after Frank, which is this whole idea of Tennis Europe, ITF. Does the system determine the output of talent? Frank, what did you want to talk about on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing, is that you can see a lot of parents are kind of believing that they can buy the success by hiring you for that number of hours and that many weeks, because you are supposed to be a good coach. So my son will become a good player when he goes to you with that program. And that totally neglects the importance of the passion within the player. So I like the example you gave, like when they don't play against a wall and against the school wall, you know, or in the bedroom or whatever, hitting foam balls to the wall because they want to practice or whatever. If they don't have anything they want to do themselves more than the number of hours they're training, something is missing. So you want to have this passion to practice. And too often I can see that coaches will take the maximum number of hours. It's good for their income. It's they've got a good week to work. But actually, what is happening is only a small part of this complex field of elements that we need, and passion is one of them for sure. And you cannot buy passion. You can try to develop it, but you cannot buy it.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point. So, Voye, should we just finish briefly on my original point? Was, you know, and Frank, I realized that we haven't talked about the specialization of a certain way of playing versus developing a broader range of exposure to the sport, and that's something we could tackle maybe another time. But just to finish on, the system is the system. We have domestic events, singles events, doubles events, team events, singular events. We have Tennis Europe, ITF, and then all the events around the world. The system is the system. And you need a system because it promotes a hierarchy of competence through ages. However, because it's based on age, what are your concerns about that? Is that rigging the system for kids? They have to be so good at a certain age in order to come through?
Okay. I was part of also the group, a working group in Tennis Europe, when 12 and under competitions, Tennis Euro competitions have been established. And I remember different discussions we had at that time. Personally, perhaps you will now be surprised after what I was saying during this conversation. I was against this at all. I was saying to the people that actually what we will do with including also 12 and under category, we'll start to create like a race to the pro. Race to the pro. We have race to yellow, but it's also creating a race to the pro. So everybody want to be at the top already at the age of 12, 14, 18 to cut this weight. And we all know the reason, because it's expensive also.
Yeah.
Who can afford it for 10 years? So it's, especially if it is parents driven, then it's actually obvious reason why they want to make a shortcut. Now, what is actually happening at present, in my opinion, we have in Europe actually great international competition structure with 12, 14, 16, and then ITF 18 and under, I would call it competitive opportunities. And when we were discussing including also 12 and under, the argument that came, and it's a very strong argument, is that first of all, if we don't do it, somebody else privately will organize it. And we are witnessing now that there are several private academies that are offering 10 and under international competitions already, together with 12, 14 and under competitions as a private business. And yeah, because there is an interest in, I would call it, tennis market for this. It was not wrong for Tennis Europe to organize it without ranking, as you know, but with some points that are calculated when they are turning 13 and able to start to play 14 under tournaments. What for me is even more important and really, I believe, very dangerous is this age eligibility rules. I don't want to make a mistake, but already I think at the age of 12, 13, the players are eligible to play even 18 and under competitions. Mm-hmm. At the age of 14, okay, there is a number of competitions that girls can play already at the WTA Tour. Mm-hmm. And these rules are actually giving ground for justifying, I would call it, early specialization and early success.
But Voye, just to share with you an interview that I did in Tarbes some years ago when Coco Gauff was 12. So I interviewed her father, a very charismatic, dominant figure. You know, she was good young. She was good young, and at 12 she was playing Tarbes, a year young, maybe even 2 years young. I don't know, but he would say that she was training in Florida. She was doing roughly 3 hours a day. You know. And she was playing not that many events, actually. She said she was playing about, 15 to 20 events a year. Well, that's almost one every 2 weeks. That's still quite a lot, I believe. But it wasn't a huge amount. It wasn't every weekend. But what he did say is that she was playing up a lot, and she was playing in the under 18 events, and she was someone at 14, 15 was playing Wimbledon. I mean, this girl was good young, right? She was good young. And therefore, if we don't allow her to play in the age groups above, because she's seriously good, like Hingis was the same, you know, we know these players, they're good. Kim Clijsters is the same, they're all the best. Serena, you know, they were playing those top events at a very young age. Are we not prohibiting their ability to succeed at a natural pace if we don't allow them to play in tournaments above their age group? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts? Actually, with these examples and only talking about them, these examples, we are setting the stage and expectations by the parents and coaches that everybody has to be like that, and they are actually outliers.
Yeah, good point. It's a great point.
And that's a problem. It's not a problem for me when Coco Gauff or some other extraordinary player, Nadal win at the age of 18 the Roland Garros. Unbelievable for me still nowadays. So preventing, it's about preventing or protecting. Preventing extraordinary players to reach top earlier, or protecting many players. And I believe that because of this, what we are hearing in the media very often about these extraordinary players, very many are not even trying because they have no chance. So it's a very complex question. And if you ask me, I don't think I have a definite answer, or that I really know what has to be done, because tennis is a very complex world, as we all know. But there are several threats and a lot of opportunities.
Voya, thank you for that. Frank, do you want to finish the meeting with any last minute thoughts about what we've talked about so far?
Yeah, well, there's, I think there could be a very easy way to deal with the age rule, but that would be if we all had orphans and no parents, and maybe also if we didn't have coaches. And I will explain this bold statement, because it's when you think of the development of players, it's essential that you meet players of your level, maybe a little bit better, you know, because that can really challenge you to improve. So that's good. But in many cases, this striving to play the highest possible level at the youngest possible age is just to impress, and to be able to tell your acquaintance, like, yeah, my daughter is now 12, but she's playing under 16. And then, like, you know, that is good. And the fact that she loses everything, like love and love, you know, that they don't want to tell that. People like to make statements about, my kid is playing in Brazil now, and she won in an ITF tournament. She played, you know, like won 2 rounds. They won't tell you about the level of the opponents who hardly could hold a racket, you know, etc. But just the fact that it's far away and it's a higher age group is impressive for parents, friends, coaches, and sponsors. So very often it has nothing to do with the development of the player or the level they are at yet, because if that would be the only ingredient, like, my player is 8, but is able to play with 16-year-olds and it's really even matches and it's great, that would not be the problem. But because my kid is 8 and is extremely good, then it will kind of force other people to try and meet those same standards. And what always happens is, oh, Simon, how many hours is your kid playing? Oh, mine has 16 hours of practice. Then I go home and I talk to my wife. Well, Simon's kid is practicing 16 hours. Ours should also do that, or even more, because she or he will become a better player. So it's so often that it's just the numbers that are misleading people, and that very often they get to the wrong decisions for the wrong reasons.
Yeah,
and
I think it's interesting, Frank, isn't it? Because I think that it's human nature for many people to flock together. They want to fly in the same cloud, and it takes a very special person to run away from the crowd.
Yeah, sure.
Very special person said, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to subscribe to playing tournaments every weekend. We're going to pick and choose carefully. We're not going to travel to Afghanistan to get our first point. We're actually going to stay here. We're going to keep developing our game. We're going to play the right events, but we're not going to take it too heavy, too seriously. And we're not going to play 20 hours a week. We're going to play 10 hours a week. And because they don't want to play 20 hours a week. I think it takes a very brave parent to protect, to use your language, Voye, their child from the potential being a casualty of the system. Because everyone else is doing that, we need to do that. Got to play Tennis Europe, got to play Tennis Europe, got to play Tarbes, got to play Orange Bowl, got to play. So they chase the events rather than see the long-term goal as the development of their child's tennis. And but the events do tell you something. What I would say to that, though, Frank, is that the people that often, it's hard to sustain that for a long time, that traveling country to country. If you're young and you're going there and there and there and playing all these tennis, to sustain that for a long period of time is very difficult. It does find you out. It finds out the people that love it, that want to do it. And there's something in that. There's something in that, because it's you've got to be a bit nuts to play tennis. I mean, I love tennis, but I couldn't play 20 hours a week. I just never been able to play 20. I just don't love it enough. And I wouldn't want to play 30 tournaments a year, traveling suitcase. We all know tennis players. It's romanticized to their life, but let's be very clear. It's far from romantic. It is hard, week to week, country to country, losing all the time, changing coaches, family, children. It is a brutal lifestyle, and it shouldn't be romanticized by when you see Roger picking up the £1 million check at Wimbledon. So look, what a great conversation. And we could talk about this for 8 weeks in a row, couldn't we? I mean, yeah. There's so many
I like to add one more thing. Please. It is so much more safe for your ego as a player, or my ego as a parent, or my ego as a coach, to be able to tell you that my player, son, lost second round in Brazil instead of he lost the second round in Tjeerkstradeel, which is a very difficult name to pronounce, a little village here in the Netherlands. Because even if the match in Tjeerkstradeel would be really a high standard match, you never played better than that. It was excellent, but you lost first round. And then in Brazil, you played a clumsy opponent who had a walkover in the first round. But the fact that I can say he lost second round in Brazil, and people are all impressed, because obviously you went to Brazil because you're really good, and then you lost there in the second round. So you probably won the first round. They never tell you had a walkover or a bye or whatever, So again, the influence of parents and coaches, yeah, right. It is a delusion, and people abuse those things, those facts, and misinterpret it. So if it would really be about the level of the player and the experience he gets out of this tournament he's playing, that is actually what you're looking for. And then we wouldn't need those age rules.
Yeah.
But that's where the problem comes in, when the parents want to be proud and brag about the results of their brilliant kid, or the coaches want that, and it's very often for the wrong reasons.
Frank, Voye, any last words from you that you want to sign off with?
I would like to emphasize at the end that for every coach and parent, I would advise that they look at their own kid, listen to him how much he wants to play, and look how much he plays apart from regular practice, and let him enjoy and develop kid as a person, not just as a tennis player.
Very good.
Brilliant. That's a nice summary words. And of course, my last question to the two of you, we're filming this in the middle of the European Football Championships. Who do you think is going to win? Who's your money on?
Not on Croatia, I'm sorry. I don't want to lose my money. But Holland and England are very good teams.
Yeah, maybe. Germany, though, no, I don't see us beating Germany.
No, and actually before the event, I thought France, but actually they didn't impress me. Spain started really bad and played much better in the last match. Italy is probably hardest to beat.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I would probably choose Italy, but I hope not. I really would love to see a small country like Denmark. That would really be great. They did it once, and chances are small, but that would really be fantastic when a country like Czech Republic or Denmark Sweden,
Belgium,
small
Belgium is
populations,
perhaps,
and that
Belgium.
would be Belgium. Yeah, sure, but well,
yeah.
it's still possible. Yeah.
There are around 6 teams that I think are strong contenders, and yeah, if you would know, it would not be interesting to look at. So let's enjoy some matches during next week.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you to the two of you. It's a really fruitful discussion, and it's one that we'll have time and time again. I'm sure we can come back to this again in the future and explore it further. The reason why I love doing these webinars, podcasts, is because having a conversation helps me to really articulate my thoughts more. By speaking them out, I feel that it's much more helpful for me to make sense of them at a deeper level. And the two of you brought some ideas today that I hadn't considered, and I hope that the audience will get something from that as well. So have a great week. We'll see you when we do the next one. Cheers, everyone.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.